The Exaltharians had conquered dozens of planets. They had crushed civilizations, enslaved species, and burned entire worlds without mercy. To them, war was simple. Their fleet, the largest in the galaxy, was unmatched. Their technology was centuries ahead of most species. And now, their leader, Supreme Commander Vakor, had chosen their next target, Earth, a small blue planet inhabited by humans. The Galactic Council had labeled them as young, unadvanced, and insignificant. A perfect conquest. The invasion began without warning. Thousands of Exaltharian warships entered the solar system, their black hulls absorbing the light of distant stars. Earth's defenses were laughable tiny metal satellites, weak planetary shields, and a few outdated warships that wouldn't last minutes in battle. The Exaltharians saw no real resistance. Their fleet moved in, targeting major cities. They expected panic. They expected surrender. But something was wrong. The humans weren't responding the way other species had. There were no desperate distress calls, no frantic attempts to negotiate. Just silence. Then, the first Exaltharian warship exploded. It happened so fast that no one saw where the attack came from. A battleship the size of a city, ripped apart in seconds, its remains drifting in the void. Vakor assumed it was a technical failure. But then, another ship vanished from the scanners. No explosion. No debris. Just gone. The fleet hesitated. This wasn't normal. This wasn't how invasions worked. The enemy was supposed to run, to beg for mercy. But these humans, they were waiting. The Exaltharians sent scout ships to investigate. None returned. The war fleet adjusted its formation, moving cautiously now. Then, without warning, the real battle began. Human warships appeared from nowhere. Massive vessels that had never been recorded in any galactic database. They were invisible to sensors, their black exteriors blending into space like ghosts. They struck fast and hard, tearing through Exaltharian ships with weapons no one had ever seen before. Beams of energy that sliced through armor like paper. Projectiles that ignored shields and detonated inside enemy ships. One by one, the Exaltharian fleet started to fall. Vakor watched in disbelief as his warships were torn apart. The humans weren't just fighting back, they were winning. He ordered his fleets to retreat, to regroup, and analyze the enemy's technology. But there was no time. The human warships were too fast, too efficient. It was as if they had spent centuries preparing for this exact battle. That's when Vakor realized the truth. The humans had known this was coming. They had hidden their strength, pretending to be weak while secretly building weapons far beyond anything the Exaltharians had ever seen. Desperation set in. Vakor ordered all remaining ships to target Earth directly. If they couldn't win the war, they would burn the planet. The fleet prepared to fire their planet-killing weapons. But before they could launch, the human counterattack struck with full force. Giant warships, black as night, emerged from hyperspace, surrounding the Exaltharian fleet. These were not ordinary ships. They moved without sound, without light, like shadows in the void. One by one, the Exaltharian warships were disabled. Not destroyed, disabled. Their engines failed. Their weapons refused to fire. Their communications went silent. It wasn't a battle anymore. It was a message. The Exaltharians hadn't invaded Earth. They had walked into a trap. Vakor sat in stunned silence as his ship's power shut down. Through the viewport, he saw the human fleet surrounding them. They had won, not just through strength, but through intelligence, through deception. The Exaltharians had spent centuries conquering weaker species, never facing a real challenge. But humans were different. They didn't just fight wars. They studied them. They perfected them. And now, they had shown the galaxy what they were truly capable of. A message appeared on Vakor's screen. A single sentence. Simple. Cold. You chose the wrong enemy. His blood ran cold. The war was over before it had even begun. Zukthar, the supreme warlord of the Draken Empire, stood on the bridge of his massive warship, looking down at the blue planet below. Earth, a primitive world filled with weak creatures who had barely begun exploring space. The Galactic Council had called them harmless, a species too young and inexperienced to be a threat. That was all Zukthar needed to hear. He was always looking for new conquests, new species to crush under his empire's might. Conquering humans would be easy. His war fleet of 1,000 ships moved into position, ready to strike. The invasion began at sunrise. Draken warships entered Earth's atmosphere, blocking the skies over major cities. Their weapons, capable of melting mountains, pointed directly at human civilization. Loudspeakers boomed across the world, announcing that Earth was now under Draken control. Surrender, or be destroyed. The response was silence. There were no screams, no panic, no desperate pleas for mercy. Just silence. That was the first sign that something was wrong. Then, without warning, the first Draken warship exploded in midair. No missile had been fired, no energy blast had struck it. It simply detonated. A second later, another ship fell from the sky, crashing into the ocean. Zukthar's command center lit up with alerts, ships disappearing, communications failing, soldiers vanishing from their landing zones. He demanded answers, but his officers had none. "It's the humans," one of them stammered. They were ready for us." That was impossible. The Draken Empire had been watching humans for years. Their military was weak, outdated. Their technology was centuries behind. But now, as Zukthar stared at the battlefield, he realized something terrifying. Humanity had been hiding its true power. In the cities, Draken warriors faced resistance unlike anything they had ever seen. Human soldiers didn't fight like others. They adapted. They learned. Every tactic the Draken used, the humans countered within minutes. Every weakness they exposed was immediately covered. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was how calm the humans were. They didn't just fight, they hunted. Draken patrols disappeared in the streets, taken down by unseen snipers. Entire squads went silent, their bodies never found. Warships lost control of their own systems as human hackers shut them down remotely. This wasn't a battle. This was something else. Something worse. Zukthar had fought in countless wars, but he had never seen an enemy like this. The humans weren't reacting to an invasion. They were executing a plan. And then, the real nightmare began. Human warships appeared in space, massive, black vessels that had never been detected before. They weren't registered in any galactic database. It was as if they had materialized from thin air. These ships moved faster than anything the Draken had encountered, their weapons tearing through the invaders like paper. Energy beams sliced through Draken armor. Guided missiles changed direction mid-flight, finding weak points no one should have known about. Entire fleets disappeared in seconds. It was too perfect, too precise. Humanity hadn't just prepared for war. They had been waiting for it. Zukthar tried to organize a retreat, but his ships refused to respond. A cold realization settled in. Human hackers had taken control of their fleet. One by one, the Draken warships turned against their own army, firing on their allies. What had started as an invasion had become a massacre. The mighty Draken Empire, undefeated for centuries, was falling apart. And humanity hadn't even broken a sweat. Zukthar watched as his forces crumbled, his empire's greatest warriors slaughtered like cattle. He had underestimated humans. Everyone had. And now, the price was being paid. A message appeared on his warship's main screen. A single sentence. Cold. Unforgiving. This was never a war. This was your execution. Zukthar sank into his chair, his hands trembling. He had made a mistake. The biggest mistake of his life. He had chosen the wrong enemy. And now, his empire would cease to exist. The Krivtak Empire had spent centuries conquering weaker species, crushing entire civilizations under their rule. Their fleets moved like a storm, swallowing planets before their victims even knew what was happening. To them, humanity was just another insignificant race, a primitive species barely taking its first steps into the galaxy. When the Krivtak warlords met to decide their next conquest, Earth seemed like the perfect choice. No allies, no powerful fleets, no real military presence in space. A simple invasion. An easy victory. The fleet was assembled, thousands of warships, armed with weapons capable of turning planets into dust. The invasion began with absolute confidence. The Krivtak moved in without hesitation, expecting no resistance. Their ships entered Earth's orbit, their weapons locked onto human cities. But something felt wrong. There was no panic, no distress signals, no desperate attempts to negotiate peace. The humans weren't reacting the way they should have. Then, the first Krivtak battleship disappeared. It didn't explode. It didn't send a distress call. It was just gone. One moment, it was on their scanners, and the next, nothing remained. Confusion spread through the fleet. Their sensors picked up no wreckage, no energy signatures, no sign of an attack. A second ship vanished. Then, a third. Panic crept into the Krivtak command. This wasn't normal. There was no visible enemy, no warning of where the attacks were coming from. Their strongest ships were vanishing like shadows in the dark. Warlord Vrogan, the supreme commander of the invasion, ordered all ships to regroup. He had fought many battles, but he had never seen anything like this. The enemy was striking from nowhere. His war fleet, powerful enough to destroy entire worlds, was crumbling, and he didn't even know who was attacking them. Then, the real horror began. Human warships appeared, emerging from the darkness of space like ghosts. These were not the old, weak ships the Krivtak had expected. These were massive black vessels, silent and invisible to scanners. They moved without sound, without warning, striking with deadly precision. Their weapons were unlike anything the Krivtak had ever seen. Energy beams that ignored shields. Missiles that curved in impossible directions, hunting their targets with terrifying accuracy. Krivtak ships exploded before they could even fire back. The fleet was falling apart. The invasion had turned into a massacre. On the ground, things were no better. Krivtak soldiers landed in human cities, expecting an easy occupation. Instead, they found a nightmare. There were no civilians running in fear. There were no weak defenders. There were only hunters. Human soldiers moved like shadows, striking from the darkness, eliminating entire squads before they could react. Snipers picked off officers with perfect precision. Explosives turned their landing zones into traps. Every street, every building, every dark corner was a battlefield. The Krivtak weren't fighting an army. They were being hunted by ghosts. Warlord Vrogan tried to regain control, but his communications were jammed. His forces were isolated, his ships falling one by one. The humans were everywhere, yet nowhere. It was as if they'd been waiting for this moment, as if they had prepared for this exact war. And then the truth became clear. The humans had never been weak. They had never been defenseless. They had only pretended to be. For years, they had hidden their true strength, letting the galaxy believe they were harmless. But the moment the Krivtak arrived, the mask came off. This wasn't an invasion. This was a trap. Humanity had let them come, had let them enter their territory, had let them believe they had already won. And now, they were being wiped out with terrifying precision. Vrogan's last remaining warships tried to flee, but the humans didn't allow it. One by one, they were taken down, their escape routes cut off. The last thing Vrogan saw before his flagship exploded was a single message appearing on his screen. Simple. Cold. You never saw us coming. Then everything went dark. The Krivtak Empire had just learned the most terrifying truth in the galaxy. Humanity was not the prey. They were the predators. For centuries, the galaxy had believed a simple truth: humanity was weak. They were a young species, trapped on their tiny blue planet, barely capable of interstellar travel. They had no great fleets, no advanced technology, no powerful weapons. The Galactic Council saw them as harmless, a species not worth fearing. Empires ignored them, Warlords dismissed them, and conquerors looked at Earth as nothing more than an easy target. It was the biggest lie in the galaxy. And now, the Graxian Dominion was about to learn the truth. High Lord Drex of the Graxian Dominion stood aboard his flagship, watching as his warfleet moved into Earth's orbit. 1,000 warships, armed with weapons powerful enough to crack planets in half. The invasion would be swift. His forces would land, crush any resistance, and claim Earth as another trophy in the Dominion's endless conquest. The humans had no real defenses, just a few primitive warships, outdated planetary shields, and ground forces that had never fought an interstellar war. It would be over in hours. The first sign that something was wrong came when the Dominion's sensors failed. One moment, the fleet had complete control of Earth's airspace, and the next, their scanners were filled with static. Ships started vanishing from the fleet's formation, no explosions, no distress calls. They were just gone. Drex ordered his forces to maintain formation, but panic was already setting in. His officers scrambled to find answers, but none came. Then, without warning, the human counterattack began. Massive warships, black as the void, emerged from nowhere. They had no energy signatures, no visible weapons, and no recorded presence in any galactic database. These ships weren't just new, they were ghosts. Before the Dominion could react, the first attack struck. Beams of pure energy cut through Graxian warships, like they were made of paper. Missiles moved like living creatures, dodging defenses and striking weak points with impossible precision. The Graxians returned fire, but it was useless. Their weapons couldn't lock onto the human ships, as if they weren't even there. Drex watched in horror as his mighty fleet, the pride of the Dominion, was torn apart within minutes. Every strategy he had used in past wars failed. Every advantage he had relied on was meaningless. The humans had been underestimated, but now their true power was on display. And it was terrifying. On the ground, things were no better. Graxian soldiers landed in human cities, expecting weak resistance. Instead, they were met with death. Human forces fought with brutal efficiency, adapting to every move the invaders made. Guerrilla fighters struck from the shadows, snipers eliminated officers with perfect accuracy, and explosives turned every street into a war zone. The Graxians weren't fighting a primitive race. They were fighting professional killers. Drex tried to contact the Galactic Council, but there was no response. Humanity had jammed all communications, isolating the Dominion's forces. Every escape route was blocked. The truth became clear: this wasn't a war. This was a slaughter. The humans had let the galaxy believe they were weak, hiding their true strength until the perfect moment. And now, the trap had been sprung. As Drex's flagship lost power, a message appeared on his screen. A single sentence, cold and final. The biggest lie in the galaxy was that we were weak. Drex felt true fear for the first time in his life. The invasion had failed. The Dominion had been deceived. And now, humanity was revealing its true nature, not as victims, not as prey, but as the deadliest species in the galaxy. Grand Marshal Vrozak of the Zarkilian Empire sat in his command chair, a confident smile on his face. The invasion of Earth was progressing exactly as planned. His warfleet, one of the most powerful in the galaxy, had surrounded the primitive human planet within hours. Thousands of warships hovered above their cities, their weapons aimed at every major population center. The humans had no chance. The Galactic Council had classified them as a developing species, not a threat, not worth worrying about. It was almost laughable. Vrozak had crushed entire civilizations, had burned worlds to ash, and had faced powerful enemies who still trembled at the mention of his name. And now, he was expected to fear humans? The thought amused him. With a wave of his hand, he gave the order. The war had begun. But something was wrong. His forces should have been met with panic, with desperate cries for mercy, with futile attempts at resistance. Instead, there was silence. No global distress signals. No terrified broadcasts begging for negotiations. Just silence. Then, his ships started disappearing. Not destroyed. Not shot down. Just gone. One moment, they were on his screens, and the next, nothing remained. No wreckage, no energy signatures, no escape pods. It was as if they had never existed. His officers scrambled for explanations, but there were none. More ships vanished. Communications were failing. A deep sense of unease settled over the fleet. This was not how an invasion was supposed to go. Then, the first human warship appeared. It was unlike anything Vrozak had ever seen. A massive black vessel, silent and imposing, moving through space like a phantom. No energy readings, no weapon signatures, just a void in the shape of a ship. And it was not alone. More of them materialized out of the darkness, surrounding the Zarkilian fleet. Before Vrozak could react, the attack began. Beams of energy cut through Zarkilian warships as if their shields did not exist. Missiles struck with terrifying precision, finding weaknesses that should have been impossible to detect. Ships exploded one by one, their crews vanishing before they could even scream. The Zarkilian fleet, once unstoppable, was being torn apart in minutes. On the ground, the nightmare continued. Zarkilian soldiers, bred for war, landed in human cities expecting an easy battle. What they found instead was a nightmare. The humans did not fight like prey. They fought like predators. There were no panicked civilians, no weak armies crumbling before them. Instead, the Zarkilian forces were met with cold, calculated destruction. Snipers eliminated officers before they could give orders. Explosives turned buildings into death traps. Entire battalions disappeared, their bodies never found. It was as if the humans had been waiting for this moment, as if they had planned every step of this battle long. Before it even began, Vrozak's mind raced. This wasn't possible. The humans weren't supposed to be this powerful. The Galactic Council had declared them harmless. But now, as his fleet crumbled and his soldiers fell, he understood the truth. Humanity had never been weak. They had pretended to be weak. They had hidden their true power, allowing the galaxy to believe they were insignificant. And now they were showing their true face. Not as victims, not as a species to be conquered, but as something far more terrifying. Vrozak's flagship lost power. The screens around him flickered, then went black. A single message appeared, glowing in blood-red letters. This wasn't a war. It was a warning. His breath caught in his throat. Humanity was not just fighting back. They were sending a message to the entire galaxy. A message that would never be forgotten. And as the last of his fleet was erased from existence, Vrozak finally understood. The Zarkilian Empire had made the worst mistake possible. They had chosen the wrong enemy. And now they would pay the price.